Many people, whom I have the greatest respect for, believe that there are demons which are external to us, although they can possess us. I have experience myself of being possessed, seeing others who are possessed and helping others who are possessed. I also interact with these demons, which those I assist call jinn. Despite this evidence, I don't actually believe that they're external to our consciousness. Nevertheless, this is a very fluid area which questions what is the self, what is internal and what is external, but most of all, what is reality. Because all this is unanswered, despite disagreeing with those who believe in external demons, I actually find that it doesn't matter. I realise that many of you listening will want to know if demons are real and will see this as a cop-out. But I promise you, if you have real experience of interacting them, you will come to understand that this is unimportant. You see, I have to talk as though demons are external to have a degree of reality, simply to communicate with others, especially those I assist. So what are these demons? Are they the demons of the Abrahamic religions? Maybe, but these are a product of the furtive imagination of the religious hierarchy of the Middle Ages. However, much religious fanatics attempt to find justification for a belief in demons within the scriptures. Furthermore, there are rarely any connections between these demons and the devil, or the practice of Satanism, if indeed there actually is a practice of Satanism. Or could they be these demons, or could they be the demons and gods of ancient religions? Again, maybe. Certainly those whom I respect will claim one or the other, or both of these explanations, because they've interacted with these demons. But I believe whatever we venerate, or maybe I should say strongly believe in, somehow has a validity within the collective unconscious. Perhaps I need to add that definitions from the Abrahamic religions are often not that helpful. Should these entities be called demons or jinn? What's the difference between demons, angels and jinn? After all, the scriptures don't tend to see the demons and jinn as bad or evil, or necessarily bad or evil. What of the ghost of the dead, and how do they fit in? Is it right to call the gods of ancient people gods even? Often they seem more like angels, pointing to the consciousness of inanimate objects, plants and animals, or simply a focus for petitioning or superstitions. Rather surprisingly, these demons are also revealed during psychological therapy, and that is the true focus of this vlog. Psychoanalysis was established in the early 1890s by Sigmund Freud. Psychoanalysis is a set of theories and therapeutic techniques that deal in part with the unconscious mind, and which together form a method of treatment for mental disorders, or maybe I should simply say psychological issues. Freud distinguished between the conscious and unconscious mind, arguing that the unconscious mind largely determines behaviour and cognition owing to unconscious drives. Freud observed that attempts to bring such drives into awareness triggers resistance in the form of defence mechanisms, particularly repression, and that conflicts between the conscious and unconscious material unconscious material can result in mental disturbances. Freudian theory suggests that adult problems can be traced to unresolved conflicts from certain phases of childhood and adolescence, caused by fantasy stemming from their own drives. Freud's redefinition of sexuality to include its infantile forms led to formulate the Oedipus complex as a central tenet of psychoanalytical theory. There are different trajectories for the boy and the girl, which arise as the effects of a castration complex. Anatomical differences, the possession of a penis, induces castration anxiety for the boy, whereas the girl experiences a sense of deprivation. In the boy's case, this castration complex includes the Oedipal phase, whereas for the girl, it precipitates it. Although the psychoanalysis movement has been fractured many times, there are two major theorists who were effectively banished by the Freudian core. The first is Erich Fromm, who took Freud's ideas about sexual repression and began treating it with actual sexual activity. I've already issued a vlog on Fromm, for whom I have a lot of time. The second is Carl Gustav Jung, who de-emphasised the importance of sexual development and focused on the collective unconsciousness, the parts of the unconscious that contain memories and ideas that Jung believed were inherited from ancestors. Following his expulsion from the psychoanalysis movement in 1913, at the age of 38, Jung experienced a confrontation with the unconscious. He saw visions and heard voices. He worried at times that he was menaced by a psychosis or was schizophrenic. He decided that this was a valuable experience, and in private he induced a process of active imagination. He recorded everything he experienced in small journals, and around 1915 Jung commissioned a large red leather-bound book and began to transcribe his notes along with paintings, working intermittently for 16 years. Rather like the novels that I have written and uploaded as audiobooks on this channel, although unlike Jung, I have never taken a revolver to bed with me. Jung argues that the shadow plays a distinctive role in balancing one's overall psyche, the counterbalancing to consciousness. Without a well-developed shadow, an individual can become shallow and extremely preoccupied with the opinions of others. Not wanting to look at their shadow directly, Jung argues, often results in psychological projection. Individuals project imagined attitudes onto others without awareness. And this is close to my definition of black magic. But it would also include a good many of the arguments I get into onto this platform, especially with people wanting to define my beliefs as a Muslim in order to attack them, but beliefs I don't actually hold. And as Jung said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognising the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge. But the shadow is not always dark. The qualities of the individual, of an individual may hate or love in another, may be manifestly present in the individual, who does not see the external material truth. In order to truly grow, an individual Jung believed that both the persona and the shadow should be balanced. Jung said that he did not only believe in, but proclaimed that he knew our world was populated by demons. And he was sure that many people were possessed by these disincarnated spirits. Unfortunately, it's my fate that other people, especially those who are themselves possessed by demons, think me mad because I believe in these powers. But that is their affair. I know that they exist. They're demons, all right, as sure as there is a book involved, and that's Carl Jung. Demons, or autonomous complexes, have a possessive and obsessive effect on consciousness. When we see a demon, we know its name and we get to handle it. Naming is exorcism, as it dispels the demon's power over us. This is an important principle in combating and sending black magic, including the name of the mother's victim. The act of naming is like baptism, extremely important as regards the creation of personality. For a magical power has been attributed to the name since time immemorial. To know the secret name of a person or a demon is to have power over them. Carl Jung. This is a tradition continued in Java today, and I don't know my wife's real name. Perhaps this simply reflects my view that the more we know about an issue, the easier it is to work with it, including in my tarot readings. But patients rarely see it in this way, and withhold information. This seems to originate with a distrust of the helper, that they may be using subterfuge, and in my experience they often are. For Jung, these demons are contained within the unconscious shadow, but can also seemingly independent demons which belong to our collective unconsciousness. The emergence of unconsciousness forces out the collective unconscious, typically evokes confusion and blindness, including unconsciousness. As the influence of the collective unconscious increases, so the conscious mind loses all its power of leadership. Imperceptibly it becomes the lead, while an unconscious and impersonal process gradually takes control. Thus, without noticing it, the conscious personality is pushed about like a figure on a chessboard by an invisible player. It is the player who decides the game of fate, not the conscious mind and its plans. Again, that was Carl Jung. Related to the Freudian tradition, Gestalt is a theory of perception that emphasises the processing of entire patterns and configurations rather than individual components. Group dynamics comes from Gestalt and is a system of behaviours, psychological processes occurring within social groups, intra-group dynamics, or between social groups, intergroup dynamics. The study of group dynamics can be useful in understanding decision-making behaviours and creating effective therapy techniques. Tea groups or training groups are group sessions where participants, typically between 8 and 15 people, learn about themselves and about small group processes in general through the interaction with others. They use feedback, problem solving and role play to gain insights into themselves, others and groups. A tea group meeting does not have to have an explicit agenda, structure or expressed goal. Under the guidance of a facilitator, the participants are encouraged to share emotional reactions, for example, anger, fear, warmth or envy, that arise in response to their fellow participants' actions and statements. The emphasis is on sharing emotions as opposed to judgments or conclusions. In this way, tea group participants can learn how their words and actions trigger emotional responses in people they communicate with. I have experience of facilitating tea groups and a more structured variant known as open space technology. Often with tea groups, this moderation involves leaving the group to resolve their own issues, sometimes for days on end. Tea groups have frequently been used to help people suffering from post-traumatic stress, and it's often in these groups that some unexpected incidents have occurred, which I have indeed witnessed. In particular, demonic possession is reported far more times than many of you would believe. Now largely discredited, neuro-linguistic programming claims that there is a connection between neurological processes, languages and acquired behaviour, and that these can be changed to achieve specific goals in life. It was much hyped and even purported to banish our demons. Indeed, during sessions I have witnessed inner demons and demonic possession having been identified. Internal family systems, or IFS, is an approach to individual psychotherapy developed by Richard C. Schwartz in the 1980s. It combines system thinkings with the view that the mind is made up of relatively discrete subpersonalities, each with its own unique viewpoint and qualities. Thus it suggests that we're all somewhat schizophrenic. IFS uses system psychology, particularly as developed for family therapy, to understand how these collections of subpersonalities are organised. IFS promotes internal connections and harmony to bring the mind back into balance rather than fighting these subpersonalities. Reminiscent of Jung's belief in integrating the shadow. In the IFS model, there are three general types of parts. Exiles represent psychological trauma, often from childhood, and they carry the pain and fear. Exiles may become isolated from the parts and polarise the system. And managers and firefighters try to protect a person's consciousness from preventing the exile's pain from coming to awareness. And managers take on preemptive, protective roles. They influence the way the person interacts with the external world, protecting the person from harm and preventing painful or traumatic experiences from overwhelming the person's consciousness. Firefighters emerge when exiles break out and demand attention. They divert attention away from the exile's hurt and shame, which leads to impulsive and inappropriate behaviours, like overeating. I don't think I can say the word. It begins with a D, ends with a G. Use and or violence. They can also distract a person from pain by excessively focusing attention on activities such as overworking or overmedicating. Thus they can be seen as related to the fight or flight mode, rather than stability. They often give rise to seemingly medical conditions that I've come to see as the body fighting a possession or attempted possession. IF focuses on these relationships between parts and the core self. There are three primary types of relationships between the parts: protection, polarisation and alliance. Protection is provided by managers and firefighters. Polarisation occurs between two parts that battle with each other to determine how a person feels or behaves in a certain situation. Each part believes that it must act as it does in order to counter the extreme behaviour of the other parts. Alliance is formed between two different parts if they're working together to accomplish the same goal. IFS therapy aims to help the client access the self. Thus the self gets to know the protector or protectors, its positive intent, and develops a trusting relationship with it. Next, with the protector's permission, the client accesses the exiles to uncover the childhood incident or relationship which is the source of the burden it carries. The exile is retrieved from the past situation and guided to release its burdens. Finally, the protector can then let go of the protective role and assume a healthy one. In the abstract, this may seem rather strange, but it actually provides a methodology for Jung's shadow work. And I would say, in my experience, although you may associate these with mental disorders, we all have these unresolved issues, often dating back to our childhood. Legacy burdens are parts that are burdened by the job that they've been doing. Parts are not their burden, it's more like how they are feeling because of the jobs they've been allocated. Richard C. Schwartz also conceived of unattached burdens. This concept is was somewhat suppressed, as he believed it would discredit IFS. But therapists kept running into situations in which something in a person's mind was clearly not part of them, something that came from the outside, not native to their inner systems. Practitioner Robert Faulkner began to have experience of these unattached burdens, and they become much more mainstream. It's believed that unattached burdens often enter a person's system during trauma, when defences are weak and the system is vulnerable. It's often not possible to determine exactly when an unattached burden came in, and it isn't necessary to get them to leave. Work with unattached burdens is done by guiding the client to connect with their inner world, in establishing an interface between the conscious and unconscious minds. Within this inner realm, a person communicates and interfaces with their unattached burden in order to determine what needs to happen to get it out. This is exactly the process I use in meditation, but that is only a part of my self-medication. Medication. Unattached burdens suggest that the mind is porous. Unattached burdens have no power if we're not afraid of them. Unattached burdens can initially help us. Unattached burdens can be two-dimensional or quite complex. Unattached burdens are ecosystems. They're similar to legacy burdens, and the distinctions between the two can be porous or even non-existent, as unattached burdens can be passed down to legacy burdens. These unattached burdens can seem hostile towards the self, including encouraging us to commit suicide. I've watched a number of IFS interventions, and they're often impressive. But then I have experience of a number of psychological techniques, including the discredited neuro-linguistic programming, and they're often impressive. Nevertheless, in my work as a healer, IFS does have some strong resonance with my experience. In the IFS, the self is the agent of psychological healing. Therapists help the client to access and remain in the self, providing guidance along the way. However, because of past harmful incidents or relationship, protectors have stepped in, have taken over the self. Despite claiming to help others, I know that actually it is the patient who heals themselves and not I. There's no attempt to work with exiles until the client has obtained permission from the protectors who are protecting it. This allegedly makes the method relatively safe, even in working with traumatised parts. Whilst I have not used a concept like this, I do find that in order to work with jinn, it's better to gain their permission and to treat them with respect and to ask them to move elsewhere rather than commanding them. Indeed, the parts are asked where they would like to move and often claim the light. This has much resonance with my own spiritual experience of having found a light of pure love and bliss. It also reminds me of the theology of so many Islamic thinkers, especially Persian, such as Shawadawadi, for whom I have a lot of time. All this is in sharp contrast to exorcism and ruqyah, which involves commanding the demons or jinn, attempting to convert them to Abrahamic religions, even killing them, based on the assumption that this is even possible, which I doubt. It also contrasts with many of the practices in ceremonial magic, in which demons are bound and commanded. Nevertheless, an unattached burden cannot stay in a person's system if all of that person's parts are in agreement that it needs to leave. Within IFS, it's critical that the therapist is not frightened of these parts, including unattached burdens, even though it's reported that they can attach themselves to the therapist. What we do not fear inside us, whether organic or not, has no power over us. Again, this is absolutely my experience of working with jinn. Indeed, they appear to feed off fear, or at least be attracted to it. Whereas ceremonial magicians see demons as dangerous and take precautions, such as circles, bindings and banishing rituals. As I have mentioned, unattached burdens seem to enter the patient at times of trauma. This absolutely coincides with my experience of jinn. In Indonesia, we often, but not always, claim that these have been sent by the black magician. Although I'm willing to consider that black magic simply creates trauma through fear, and then the jinn simply take advantage of the trauma. There is some debate between therapists if unattached burdens are truly unattached. Some appear to have come from those who've been in contact with, including being passed on to us when we die. Others appear to be related to ancestral trauma, while some appear to be completely independent, but could be related to the collective unconsciousness. All these all these are related to my experience of healing. A jinn certainly seemed to enter us after another dies. Others, including some of my own, have an ancestral karmic origin. In Indonesia, we see this as ghost possession, but I've already felt that they are jinn, which were attached to the deceased. Definitely jinn are sent by black magicians, but as I say, they maybe simply create the fear which attract jinn. This is the battle of the will that I so often mention. But this seems to be related to collective unconsciousness, and maybe even the fear created by Abrahamic religions regarding good and evil, the devil and demons. I'm sure that you're wondering if, a result of exploring unattached burdens, I have refined my views that demons are external to us. Well, not really. You see, because I hold animistic, almost panpsychic beliefs, we're all attached in some form, thus what is external. Furthermore, because I'm a non-dualist, my conception of what is real will be very different to most of you. But just maybe you're beginning to comprehend why I say this really doesn't matter. You see, as a non-dualist, I believe that our consciousness creates our reality. But what is our consciousness if we're all part of a single consciousness? What this means is that whether we use religious interpretations of demons, Jungian of the shadow, or IFS of unattached burdens, that is exactly what we'll experience, even see them. I have to convince myself that jinn exist for the benefit of those I help, and in doing so I'm able to interact with jinn, but really don't see them as having a presence beyond my collective consciousness. As I have said, all therapy techniques are impressive when observed. Thus, when I've become somewhat interested in IFS, without necessarily wishing to practice the techniques, but I did borrow them in meditation. At the age of 4, my parents moved from Shrewsbury to Condover village. My father ran the village store and my mother a hairdresser's. Mother never forgave my dad for taking her away from me, and was repeating this even on her deathbed. I do recall being very frightened and all alone in the flat above their businesses. This had been a reoccurring image during meditation. During a Solomon's Temple meditation, on which I've already issued a guided vlog, I came across a 4-year-old me, all alone. Using IF techniques, I established that the young I was frightened and wanted someone to play with. So I played with the young me, who thanked me, saying, "Daddy." He was so shocked when I explained that I was actually the adult he. I then asked if he wanted to come with me, and he said yes and followed. On my journey to Solomon's Temple, I always passed my mother and father. As the young I spotted them, he cried out, "Mummy and Daddy," and ran to them. That is where I left him, and feel not only have I moved on from this loneliness, but placated my mother, who wanted to keep the 4-year-old me. Maybe that was a part of her narcissistic fantasy of me, whom she never released. Whatever, it feels very positive. Just a final observation. The scriptures seem to point to the same conclusions as I, although maybe this is simply my own confirmation bias. But the religious authorities of the Middle Ages misinterpreted the scriptures and created a hierarchy, an entire narrative based on their own deepest fears.